Welcome to the Matt Phillips Podcast. I am Matt Phillips, your sales leadership coach, mental toughness expert, and founder of Matt Phillips Coaching. We help sales managers and leaders make more money, save time, and become kick-ass leaders of their sales teams. And that's what we're here to talk about on this podcast. We are here to give you the tools and tactics to build a well-oiled sales machine and teach you the mental toughness skills so you can show up confident, focused, emotionally in control, and ready to energize your team. It's time to talk sales leadership and mental toughness. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome, everybody, to today's podcast episode. It is Matt Phillips, and I am thrilled, as usual, to introduce you to a very special guest, Mr. Rob Jeppsen. Rob, I'm going to get into your intro here in a minute, but welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you, and I'm excited to see you again, man. I'm a big fan of what you do, and I'm honored to chop things up with you here today.
This is great. So let me tell you a little about Rob. Let me brag on him a little bit. He and I met just a couple weeks ago, actually, and I was a guest on his podcast, and we had such a phenomenal conversation, not only during the podcast, but prior to that, and as we were prepping for the podcast. And there's certain people that, again, you just hit it off with, and I think Rob used this word of like, we're kindred spirits, right?
We are.
I truly believe that.
Yeah.
And here's the deal. We both are developing sales leaders, right? Rob, you are the managing director of Jeppsen Performance Group. You are a coach to elite sales leaders. You are a keynote speaker. You are the host of the Sales Leadership Podcast, the curator of the world's largest collection of sales leadership assets. You've, by the way, built and sold 3 tech companies. I mean, the list goes on and on of the things that you've done. And now your focus, just like me, is how do we coach sales leaders to that next level? How do we just develop people differently so they have a bigger impact, better impact on those around us? And that's why I'm so excited to have you. Because again, I always joke that like in our prep session, we probably should have recorded that, right? Because we just start spitballing left and right. And we're like, oh man, like on the same page. And we're going to have some fun today diving in and talking about leadership and about sales and about just getting the best out of people. So thanks again for joining.
I'm grateful that you invite me. Like I said, the things you do, I'm a big fan of, and we're going to talk about fun stuff today. So I'm ready to rock and roll. Let's get after it, man.
Let's do it. So I always like to open my podcast with this question, right? You have a lot of different experience personally, growing, developing companies, working with great companies. But as you look back at just kind of your history, what's some of the best leadership advice you've ever received, and how do you use that today?
So this is going to be one of the stories that I didn't realize was that important, Matt, until like 20 years later. It took me 20 years to realize how, which is why like I love what guys like you do, and what I try to do as good as you is what took me 20 years to learn. I hope I could help someone else learn in 1 or 2 years. That's like my whole thing.
Yes.
So I was in my first really big head of like VP of sales job. I was brought on to be the chief sales officer for a large publicly traded financial institution, one of the top 15 in the United States. And I was in my mid 30s. I thought I was a badass. I thought I'd arrived, right? I had my parking spot. I had all the things. I walk in, I got my suit on, it was a long time ago. And
love that.
I get on the elevator and I'm getting ready to go up to the whatever floor it was. And there was an older gentleman on the elevator that was holding the door for me. He said, "Oh, what floor are you going to?" I told him, he was like, "Oh, that's where I'm going." He looked at me up and down. He's like, "I don't know you. Are you meeting with someone on my floor?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, this is my first day on the job." He's like, "Oh, what's your role?" And he said, I said, "I'm here to run sales." And he looked me up and down. He's like, "I've heard about you." And I said, "How long have you been here?" It turns out he'd been with this organization 40 years. I wasn't even 40 years old. I was in my 30s. He'd been there 40 years. I was like, wow, got any advice for the new guy? What he said, I wish I'd listened to better. Okay. Sorry for the long build up to this. What he said was, this organization will take everything from you that you let it have. It's not that it's bad. It's not that it's a bad place. There's really good people here. But this company will take from you every single thing you let it have. So my advice is save something for you. Save something for you. Save something for your family. I didn't pay attention until I had made a lot of mistakes. Here's what I see. That advice would have been big, because right now I see sales leaders and salespeople not giving themselves permission to prioritize themselves, Matt. And if I had done that, you're not giving yourself permission if you apologize for things. Like you and me talked in our prep here, like, what did you do over the 4th? And you said, hey, are you like me? You work all the time. I'm like, yes. And I make apologies. Like someone will hit me up over the weekend and I have now created boundaries because I'm giving myself permission to prioritize myself, and I won't respond to someone until Monday. But if you find yourself apologizing for that, you're sending a message that you don't have permission to prioritize yourself. There are 3 teams that need you. Number 3 is your company that hired you to be a sales leader. They need you for your A game. Number 2 is your people. It could be your family, your friends, whatever. They need your A game too. But the one that nobody ever thinks about, number 1, you need your A game. So if you give yourself your A game, you will then be able to give it to your people and your company. If you only try to give it to your company, you'll fail in the other 2 and you will crash and burn. And I see it happen all the time. That's the best advice I'd give right now. We got to worry about the whole person, Matt, and not just a salesperson. Give yourself permission, brother.
Oh, amen to that. It's such a crucial point. And I love the words that he used, because it's like, it will take what you let it take.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we forget, as owners of businesses, as sales leaders in different areas of lives, like, we actually have more control than we think. And we need to embrace that as owners of our function, owners of our team, owners of our lives, of like, no, I've got to understand how you prioritize it, right? That if it's myself first and then my people and then the company, everything benefits if I choose to show up strong and powerful in that moment and be like, no, I control this situation. This is what I'm choosing to, how I'm choosing to allocate my time.
If you do that for you, then you can do that for your reps. And as a sales leader, there's a lot of sales leaders say, oh, we got to take care of you. But if you don't do yourself, then if you're still sending emails at 2 a.m. or whatever, I just have found, man, that may be non-sales or non-leadership related advice. It is the great advice. Think of the whole person and not just the salesperson, but it's got to start with you.
Yes. So. Yeah. You reminded me of my dad told the story once where he was in sales. He sold Peterbilts pretty much his whole career. Peterbilt and Kenworth, like the big rigs, right? And when my dad joined this one company, actually in Utah, funny enough, I know you're based in Utah. We lived there for a couple of years, and his boss told him, because my sister and I were at the age where we were playing lots of sports, stuff like that. He said, told my dad straight up, he goes, if you miss a sporting event for one of your kids, you will not be working here anymore.
I like that.
I don't think that's said enough.
Nope.
But exactly to your point, right? Of what's truly important. And I think that's such a critical piece of advice. Oh, I love it. I love it.
I wish I'd paid more attention to it. I didn't until later in life when it was kind of forced on me. And I think about it a lot, man. And so if your listeners if you just do that, everything else, you'll get better at everything else. I promise you, everything else falls into place.
Well, so let's talk tactically real quick. I want to stay on this point for a minute. So tactically, how do we do that? Like, how have you seen success in like you setting these better boundaries now and just being clear? What's one thing that like the listeners can do to make sure that they achieve that?
So here's the 3 things. Number 1, you got to give yourself permission. Okay. And here's my litmus test. If you find yourself making apologies, I went on the Rob Jeppsen apology tour, apologizing to people when I tried to give and I'll tell you a story about it here in a second, but that's number 1. I'm going to give you the 3 things and we'll tell you a story. Number 1, give yourself permission, but legit give yourself permission. Okay. Make it okay to say, I'm going to prioritize myself. Number 2, you've got to set boundaries. Permission is one thing, but permission is nothing if you don't have boundaries. I'll explain what that means. I'll do it right here. Like one of my clients, he got on the call with me. I've been coaching for 3 years. He's a great guy. He's a terrific sales leader, Matt. He got on the call, and usually we talk like you and I did before we started. We're friends. After this long, we're friends. Yep. He had like the Eeyore dark cloud, and he's like, Rob, he didn't even want to say hi because I need 3 things. Number 1, we got to talk on coaching because I've decided I suck at it. Number 2, we got to work on work-life balance because this company's asking me to do so much. I can't do it all, and I suck at all of them. And number 3, I got to work. Number 2 is prioritization. Number 3 is work-life balance because I'm working so hard. It's going into the rest of my life, and I think I'm going to lose my family over it. I was like, you need boundaries, man. And there's a lot of ways we can build boundaries. That might be as simple as I don't respond to calls after this time, or I only work when I'm at work.
Yes.
There's a lot of ways you can do that. Simple boundaries. For me, the big one was after my divorce, it was really dark, and I used my company to survive. And it hit me one day. I don't want to just survive. I want to thrive. And so the first thing I did was I said, I'm going to carve out me time. And I made a decision. I will not respond to a customer over a weekend unless it was something on Friday I knew was a problem. Then I will. Otherwise, my first appointment Monday morning is responding to emails, phone calls, texts, LinkedIn direct messages. I'll do it Monday morning, first appointment of the day.
Yes.
When I first did that, Matt, I was terrified because I thought,
I bet.
they're going to think my only value is that I'm so accessible, right? I'm always accessible. Well, on Monday, I did the Rob Jeppsen apology tour. It was one of 3 verses. It was either A, sorry, I was a busy weekend, couldn't get back to you. B, I'm being intentional and I didn't do anything this weekend except for me. Or C, I had my sons and sorry, I was invested in my sons. 100% of the people that came back was like, A, didn't expect you to get back to me on the weekend. B, good for you for prioritizing yourself. C, you've inspired me to do the same thing.
Yes.
So I did a second week of that, still with anxiety, and I made apologies again, Rob Jeppsen apologies to it. Then after that, I've never done it again. You know you've given yourself permission if you can set a boundary without having to make an apology, which takes me to number 3. You need a system. Back to my guy that I was telling you about that was Eeyore.
Yes.
We tried to set some boundaries, and he came back to me the next week, and he's like, my wife told me to tell you something, Rob. I'm like, what did she want to tell me? He said, you've been coaching me for 3 years, but she's been married to me for 28. She says she knows me better than you do. And she wanted me to tell you it was impossible for me to create boundaries. So that's why we made a system. The system in his case was, I said, listen, what time do you come home from work? 6:30. Okay, great. What time do you go to bed? 11:30. Okay, great. What time do you get up? Well, I do workout and I do this. I get to my office around 8. Okay, so you have 8 till 6:30 to prioritize work. Of course, you can take a call here and there. But from 6:30 till 11:30, you get to prioritize home. Now, if you have anxiety because you got a lot of customer things that are happening, A, it's because you conditioned your customers that that's okay.
Yes.
B, I want you to tell your wife, I will not respond to any of these things, but I would like a 20-minute window where you'll let me at least look to see if it's urgent. You can pick the 20-minute window. You pick the time. I'll use the 20-minute time window whenever you want. He put that system in. That's an example of a system to support a boundary. And 2 weeks later, he's like, everything is better in all 3 areas because I protected myself. Is that a good example of what you were asking?
It's a fabulous example. You're bang on right that sometimes we have this fear. It's like the FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yep.
That I'm missing something, that I should be doing something, that if I'm not on email or if I don't answer that phone call, that something drastic and negative is going to happen, which is going to lead me to then whatever story you're telling yourself, right? Living in a cardboard box because you've lost everything. And I think it's that testing it out. That's what I hear in what you're doing. Like, build a system, test it.
Yeah.
It's not forever.
Nope.
We have to see what works and tweak and adjust and pivot. And you're doing that every day anyway, and through sales. But how do you have that mindset going into this? If a test to see what works. I like that. Well, that didn't really work. I'm going to adjust.
That's my favorite word in leadership right now, Matt, is intentional. You got a great listener group. You do amazing work. As you already know, I'm a fan of what you do. And your listeners and your clients are lucky to work with you because the work you do, especially around mindset, is I think as good as it gets. You know this. You don't do anything by a happy accident. You got to be intentional. And if you want to be an elite leader, and I don't know if they'll see the video, I'm got my hands up like this.
Yep.
An elite leader is extremely intentional. Anything you leave to accident will cut your ability of success in half. Yes. And so let's say if we're accidentally going to build a culture, then you can expect at best an average culture, probably a poor culture, maybe even toxic. If you're going to be accidentally prioritizing things, you're just going to be like going to wherever screams loudest, then you can expect to be average at best at your prioritization. I could do that for all of the leadership words, character or competency or capacity or clarity or culture or cadence, right? If you leave any of that to accident, you just need to know the best you can hope for is average. So if you leave your prioritization of yourself to accident, I got news for you. It's going to be at best average, and very quickly it'll degrade to poor. And that's why I say, make sure that you're intentional about these things.
It's so true. Well, so a couple of things I think are important here. One is getting reminded me of, I play golf every once in a while, right? And people
Okay.
always ask, oh, do you play golf? And I used to say, my answer used to be, Rob, well, I just don't have time. That's what I used to say. And then I finally figured out, I'm like, why am I saying this? And so when people ask me now, do you golf a lot? I will say, no, not really. I don't make the time for it.
Love that answer. What a
I,
great answer. We should break that down for your listeners. My version of your story is I learned to say, like, one of the things I like to teach leaders like you, I think I don't have time is the adult version of what the kids used to say in school of the dog ate my homework. The adult version of that is I'm too busy or I don't have time. And
so
so
good.
I love what you just did. I say replace I don't have time with it's not a priority. Exactly what you did. It's exactly what you did. And if
Yes.
you like the way that sounds, then you're okay. If you don't like the way that sounds, oh, well, did you do any pipeline work last week? Or did you do your one-on-ones last week? Oh, no, it wasn't a priority. Easy to say I was too busy, but one-on-ones with my reps, oh, it wasn't a priority. Oh, I don't really like how that sounds. Did you take
Yes.
care of the you time? Oh, no, that wasn't a priority. That shouldn't sound good, right? That
Yes.
shouldn't sound
Yes.
good. And so
It,
I love what you just said.
it's a great test. And, one thing, I don't know if you see sales leaders struggle with this, because sometimes, now we're jumping into mindset real quick, right? A little bit, but well, this is all mindset stuff, right? We know what to do. We know how to have a conversation and pick up a phone, right? It's like,
Yep.
how do I actually get myself to pick up the phone? But sometimes when we're more bold with statements, it can come across not the nicest,
You're
right?
right.
Maybe a little bit arrogant, or, like, there's certain, bad words that we use for certain people who are like that strict with their time. And I won't say it on
Yep.
today's episode, but that's something I've had to overcome too. If I sometimes I say, well, I don't make time, or do you want to golf here? No, I am doing this instead of making up an excuse, right? Or I'm choosing to go to my kid's game. And so that's why I will not be at this event or that event. And sometimes it comes across as like, oh, well, I guess it feels like they're too good for us, or they're better than us, things like that. And that's something I've had to overcome too, of like, no, like, let me explain what the priority is and why I'm not able to do this or do that. And then let their judgment go. If they choose to judge me, I guess they judge me in that moment. Have you had to struggle with that yourself, of like when you've shifted that conversation to be more blunt and priority focused and, me time or whatever it was? And how did you work through that? And then if you felt it at all, and then how do you see people work through that? Because I think that's a big thing of like, we want to be approachable and open and, come on, we're here to help. And then we put boundaries, and then we're like, these people are like, well, they're saying two different things. But so
Right.
how have you kind of dealt with that?
First of all is consistency, right? I mean, once you say this is the way I'm going to do it, like back to my story, I was terrified, Matt, when I said, man, I could take this whole episode on my journey from like feeling like I was just trying to hold on and survive. The idea of I want to thrive, like I think it's okay to say I want to thrive. I don't want to just survive. Survival's overrated, Matt.
Mm.
We got to thrive. I'm so passionate about this that we shouldn't just work our guts out and then at the end it's like, well, I worked hard and had like, no, like I'm all about purpose. I know you're a big believer in philosophy,
Yep.
and your leadership philosophy should include your purpose. And so my purpose personally, so the Rob Jeppsen leadership philosophy, because I eat my own dog food, I drink my own wine, whatever metaphor you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
I update my philosophy regularly, brother. And that's one of the reasons I like you so much, is we are kindred spirits in that.
Yes.
Like there's not many people who talk about that topic.
Yes.
So here's Rob Jeppsen's leadership purpose. My mission is to create life-changing and career-changing years for the people I work with. That's what I want, life-changing and career-changing years. Well, in order to do that, I have to be on my game. I have to. Like when people are paying for an hour of time with me, or they're hiring for, we're coaches, we sell our time, we do stuff like that. Well, I have to be sharp. I have sometimes canceled just because I wasn't sharp and I would have felt guilty charging my rate or my time for someone, and then I'm not on the top of my game. And so that's the first thing, is you got to, like, I start with purpose. Second, you got to be consistent. So if you people don't know what to expect from you, then it's easy to have that challenging problem there. Why now and not then? Or why for her and not for me? And I just am really clear. Like, I found clarity is maybe the greatest leadership tool there is.
Yes.
Success loves speed. Sales leaders, your customers, your listeners are sales leaders. Success doesn't love patience. Success loves speed. Okay. Now, you don't have to win fast, but you got to be growing fast. You got to keep growing. You got to keep getting better. And the catalyst of speed, at least in my opinion, is clarity. And the enemy of speed is ambiguity in any way. So yes, I have felt that. I'm terrified. Oh, the only reason they're going to value me is my accessibility. Well, part of it was me saying, no, my value is my ability to understand them, my ability to create I get you moments, my ability to share my perspective based on what I've done and my understanding of you. It's not that if you call at 3 a.m, I'll groggily take your call. And I know that that's an out there example, but for me, that's what it started with. Okay, my value is this. I'm not a call center, right? I'll get back to you. And now I'm at a point where I even tell them, I say, hey, we're going to work on all of you, not just the leader of you. We're going to work on all of you. And so here's how I work. When we have an appointment, I will never cancel unless like these 2 or 3 things. Number 2, I will always be ready. I will always be sharp. I will always be prepared. I will have done what I'm supposed to do. I will be available to do other things. However, here are my areas where I take care of me. I do this, I do this, I do this. I now make that part of telling them up front. So does that mean that we can't vary from that? No. But generally speaking, this is what I do. People are like, wow, that's cool. Why? I am trying so hard, Matt, to live an intentional life. Yes. And it's hard to coach people to be intentional if you're not intentional yourself. So I'm sorry that I rambled there.
This is brilliant. And I've got a cup that I have printed with my logo on it on the back. It says, be intentional, be consistent. So those words resonate with me very strongly. I hope it's resonating with all you listeners as well, because the clarity of expectations, once you have that clarity of like, this is what's important to me.
Yep. And
then you set those expectations out, which is literally the leadership philosophy. Like the way I kind of break it down is like what actions are following. And then if you lay out and provide that clarity up front and then you're consistent with it, then it becomes normal. It just becomes part of who you are. And to your point, now you're the example for the other people to do the same thing. And then you can joke with them. But if I call at 3 a.m, you sure better answer. Now, we won't joke about that. But I think that's such a critical piece to it.
I'm telling you, for all of your leaders, there are too many do what I say, not what I do leaders. If you can become a do what I do leader, it changes everything. People like reflective leaders, man. I don't know what you found. I've found that people like reflective leaders. They don't like know-it-alls, but they love people who are reflective, that can share what they've learned for these reasons. And I'm really, really passionate about that concept of intentionality, and the whole person is more important than just the business person.
Yeah, I think it's huge. And it's our job too. My philosophy, whenever I talk about people joining my team, Rob, is I will say, you have to understand that if you join Matt Phillips Coaching, that we set the bar, that we are the gold standard. And every one of our competitors is going to look at us and ask the question, what would they do?
Yeah.
What they do as far as their people, their process, their systems, the way they collaborate. And then I break those down into like the expectations and everything. And there is a personal component to it, right? Of we have to train, we have to go. And if I'm not doing that, I always joke that, you see these, out of shape coaches telling people to go run, their team that they're coaching to go run. And I'm like, but you haven't ran in 25 years. Like, come on now. Like, set the example, be the example. Like, do what you said, do what you're asking them to do. At least sprint a little bit or do something.
Let's sit in that for a second. I mean, we're just kind of Rob and Matt unplugged. I'm a musician. I love music. I play guitar. Yeah. We're doing Rob and Matt unplugged. I hope that this is meaningful. What you just said made me think of what might be one of the most important leadership words, and that's trust. And I have found, I'd be interested in your take on this. Trust comes in 3 forms, the 3 C's of trust. Number one is your character trust, and that's pretty obvious. This is a measurement of your ethics. When you say something, can I believe you, kind of
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
I won't go into that because I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Number 2 and 3 are really interesting, though. Okay. Number 2 is competency trust. Do I believe that Matt knows what he's doing? Do I believe that Matt, the gold standard, is capable? Like, or think of your listeners, like maybe you're asking him to do calls, or maybe you're asking him to work on prospecting, or maybe you're asking him to create predictable experiences. Well, do you have a competency of why would they listen to you? Like, are you able to give them? But the other is, do you have the competency as a leader? So competency trust is interesting. And the third one is the most important and the most elusive. It's connection trust. And that's a measurement of, does Matt have my best interests in mind, or am I just a means to his end? Now, when you were talking about, come on now, you haven't run in 25 years, that would say maybe there's a competency trust problem there.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the ability of making sure that people realize that the reason I want to listen to you, the reason I want to follow you, the reason I want to be part of your squad isn't just that you're a good person, the ethics side. It's you got this competency, but most important, I know you got my interest in mind. And by the way, those only come from experiences. You can't tell them. They have to experience those things. So to your listeners, a really cool idea is to say, what are the experiences that build my competency trust? What are the experiences that build my connection trust? What are my experiences to build all three types of trust, character? And when you do that, it makes it so you can be more intentional as a leader to create experiences that have them see character, which is consistency, not just your integrity, competency, both in our industry and you as a leader, and then connection. Do you know me? Do you get me? Do you know what I aspire to? Do you understand my interests? If you have all three of those things going, you're going to be a high impact leader.
Well, everything you're talking about is shifting from a reactive state to a proactive state. That's what intentionality is. It's all proactive, right? I'm going to think through this. Those 3 C's are important. I hope everybody wrote those down. But within those 3 C's, how do I proactively show those or act upon those? That's where I see a lot, staying on our unplugged piece. Like I see a lot of leaders like reactive. It's very reactive. And I used to do this back in the day, right? It was just react. You're waiting for a problem to show up at your desk, then you'll take action upon it. Instead of now what I teach and what I know you teach is, no, how do we take a step back for a minute, think ahead, and where do we want to be intentional? And how can we be consistent with those things? Because that's going to get us where we want to go personally and professionally. You agree with that?
100%. I wouldn't even add anything to it. I would just stand up on my platform and say, "Amen, brother," and keep preaching, because like that matters, Matt. Like what you're saying is dead on, and we're in a time right now. This is another trend. Let's keep the unplugged session going. Maybe MTV will license it from us, right? We're in a time right now where recent data in the last 6 months shows growing mistrust and even dislike of leaders. And it's easy to understand why. Companies have had more layoffs this year than in any year before. It's not just tech, it's everywhere. It's sad and it's crazy and it's not fun. There's nothing about it that I like. But there's this growing mistrust and even dislike for leaders. And if you go back to those 3 C's, to your point, you can create experiences that even if there's bad news, it doesn't have to be that it was a bad leader. Bad news doesn't have to mean bad leader.
Yes, that's very true. Well, it's your point. There's the layoff aspect of it. I work in a couple industries that are like super hot right now still.
Yep.
And within a super hot industry means significant movement of individuals, right? And maybe it's cooling off a little bit now, but there's significant movement. And on that note, when I talk to people about why they're moving, money's a factor, sure. But you know what comes up more often? Leaders.
Doesn't surprise me.
Go
a little deeper on it. Share that with your leaders that are listening. I'd love your leaders to hear why you're seeing that, because I think that's a really profound point.
Yeah, I'm sure you see this too. Like when we have a choice, there's lots of factors that go into moving a job. One is money. One could be benefits. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of things, right? Responsibility, promotion, all sorts of stuff go into it. And everyone's read the same articles that I have, right? That the number one reason people leave jobs is leaders. And that component is even more like impactful and important now, I believe, than ever. Because we're moving at such a fast pace, do you feel like you have the 3 C's? Are you showing up the right way with your people that they know they have your back? Or can you have that conversation if somebody says, I'm thinking about leaving, where do they trust you enough, Rob, to your point, where you can look at them and say, I think that's an amazing opportunity for you. You have to say yes to this. Even though it's outside your organization, have you built that trust with them? Going back to your 3 C's. And so our job as leaders is like, are we doing those things? Are we taking time to think and carve out time in our week to actually think about the stuff? And not enough leaders are.
What a great perspective, Matt. I like that. Yeah, you're right. There are places that are right sizing and laying off, but there are others that are hot as right now. Like there's hot places, and you're right. There's people moving, there's people that are looking, and you can learn a lot. Like a long time ago, I started this like looking for something. I started to ask myself, outside of the scoreboard, how do I know if I'm having impact as a leader? I spent a lot of time, because we're in sales, like we're in a scoreboard world. It's easy though to let the scoreboard dictate if you're good or bad. So let me ask you a question. This will be fun. Have you ever done everything right on a deal and still lost it?
Yes, indeed.
What about the flip side? Have you ever screwed a deal up 10 different ways and somehow still won?
Yes.
Of course. Of course. And so anybody who says no to either of those are either new to sales or they're just a liar. And so what that means is, yes, we're in a scoreboard world, but scoreboard doesn't necessarily say if we are improving or getting better or having impact. Don't get me wrong. I want to be very careful with this. I'm not saying the scoreboard doesn't matter. It does. Right. But I realized as a leader that there had to be other things I could look at besides the scoreboard, because there were times I did everything right and I didn't win it. And there were times that I blew it. I had no business winning it. And I don't know how I won it, but I somehow did. Okay. And I can see your leaders that are listening smiling and nodding their head like you are right now. Okay. So here's what I found. I tried to boil it down to, like, are there 2 or 3 things that make me know I'm a high impact leader in ways other than the scoreboard? I think that's a very insightful thing to do as a leader. And one of my ones that are favorite for me is, what do they bring to me? And you made me think of it when you're saying, like, are they bringing a new opportunity to you? Like, are they only bringing deals to me? Well, then they see me as a tactical leader. Are they bringing me career aspirations? Well, maybe if that's the case, then I'm a strategic leader. Are they bringing me life aspirations? Well, now I'm a mentor to them, right? And so I like seeing what they bring to me. And, you know, I started looking to that to say, what things are they bringing to me? And it's not the end all be all, but it's one that's been very helpful and insightful for me.
That's interesting. In your mind, do you try to move up the ranks of like get to that mentor level, or is it okay to be at the different level and you kind of settle in, if you will?
Yeah, it's okay. You can't be all things to all people, but it helps me know where I am with them. Yes. It helps me know how to interact with them. It helps me know how to challenge differently. And, you know, if I have people that stay tactical only, I do worry about that, because a tactical only is a very sterile relationship usually. And those are the easy ones to leave. The higher up I go, the harder it is for them to leave. But it's also the harder it is to get rid of them if you have to, too. So.
Very true. Very true. But to your point, in an environment where there are layoffs happening, or even in hot industries, and there's going to be always shifting of sales resources and reps and leaders and things like that. When you move up that chain that you described, like that makes it more sticky, right? And it's not to get you have to have a tough conversation and move somebody, you know, maybe earlier than you wanted to, or they're not a right fit. And that's always going to happen. But it seems to me like that stickiness is then better, where now, again, it goes all back to those 3 C's we talked about before. Right now, I've built that trust. I've got that like connection. Now I'm able to have the right conversations with the right people. So it shifts up to that mentor level, really.
Well, and there's lots of ways to have trust. I think trust is the currency of our relationships. I'm such a big fan of especially the mindset side of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to be a mindset coach if they see you as a tactical coach. If you think about that, I think you are at that epitome. There's a lot of people who can do process. There's a lot of people who could do metrics. There's a lot of people who could do. The hardest part, man, is what should be the baseline. Baseline is the mindset. Mindset coaching is what very few people are good at, and you're one that is. And so, but it's hard for people to like I'm thinking of one of my clients. One of my clients, I think that one of the most important things you want to get is we're at halftime right now. We're going into the second half of the year. Well, the great football coaches, they're known for being good at making halftime adjustments. Every one of your leaders, if they're close to halftime, maybe they're at it, maybe it's coming up where they all have different fiscal years.
Yes.
We need to be looking at how do I make adjustments? Well, one of the adjustments that's important to make at halftime is how do we reset this, our mindset? What do we need to adjust? What am I capable of? How do I change trajectory? Trajectory is, to me, one of the most important things to talk about. I'm thinking of this client that I have, and he's tried to get into what are you chasing? Where do you want to go? He wants to get into that with them. And they're looking at him like he's crazy because they see him as a tactical coach, Matt. And they're saying, Matt, I'm going to chase quota like I did last time. And my plan is I'm going to work hard like I always have. I'm going to do my best like I always have. And I'm going to hope that it's going to be good enough as it always has been. And if it's not, I hope you'll keep me around. And if it is, I'm sure you will. And he didn't have the relationship to have that different level of a conversation. Do you see what I'm saying?
Makes sense. Makes total sense. How do you coach your people to if I'm a leader and I want to move up that rank and become more of a teach the mental side, what's one thing that you tell your leaders to do to kind of bridge that gap and help open up that relationship differently?
You got to choose I get you over I got you. I got 20 leadership choices you got to make. One of my first 5 is I get you is greater than I got you. So I have t-shirts for every one of them, right? Growth is greater than grind. I get you is greater than I got you. And every leader in the world, so I'm looking at the camera, I'm pointing to your leaders, hopefully I can see it. Every leader in the world can say to a rep, I got you. Every leader in the world can say, oh, you need that? I got you. You need that? I got you. But if you think about that order, it's a transaction. It's like going through the drive-through lane. You want burger? You want fries with that? Sure, I got you. Oh, you want a large Coke? I got you. Okay. And that's why so many leaders are only having deals brought to them. And they are like, hey, if I need you, I'll come find you. That's a leadership style called laissez-faire leadership. That should be part of every leadership philosophy is what's your style. Laissez-faire can be successful, but it's harder because it's an I got you mindset. If you need me, I'll assume you don't. I get you means people feel seen, heard, and understood. And so you have to find ways to have them experience Matt gets me. Matt doesn't just got me, Matt gets me. And so you have to find ways to connect to them. And it's very easy to start, find common interests. One of my favorite hiring things for me, my team always, I'm sure has done all the due diligence on if they're qualified. I just want to find out if I'm going to like working with them.
Right.
So I always surprise them when we start. What are you passionate about? What do you do for fun? Because if you can't be passionate about anything outside of work, you're for sure not going to be passionate inside work. What I do for a living, what you do for a living requires a lot of energy and personal investment in people.
Yes.
I'm sure you're like me. I don't do transactions. I choose people. I bet on them. I invest heavily in them. And that requires knowing them. And so I would start by saying, think hard on how could I get that rep to say, wow, Matt gets me. Matt knows what I care about. Or you bring up, hey, on this thing that you brought to me, I've been thinking about it. And I went and I found the X, Y, and Z. And are any of these things helpful? It's like, wow. Do you see what I'm saying? And so choose I get you, not I got you. And you'll find that has people start opening up very quickly because I get you is rare.
That's so critical. And if listeners, if you're not picking up fully the depth of what Rob's saying is he's dropping some hints in there, which again, we'll have to start a new show called, to your point, Rob Matt Unplugged.
That'd be fun. We could do some good with that, I think. Yeah.
I think so. And we'll just spitball everything sales and have guests on all sorts of stuff. But what you said, which you didn't say, is ask questions.
Yeah.
And think through what questions. Like, do you know like their purpose? Do you know what drives them? Do you know their common interests? And in order to get to that information, you have to ask questions and then listen the answer. And I consider myself a fairly intelligent person, but I still have to write a lot of stuff down.
Yes.
I can't remember everything. And so it's like, listen and then write it down, type it out so you can pull it up and remember it. One of my coaches, or my main coach that I work with, every time we get on a call, nearly every time, not every time, but nearly every time we get on a call, he always asks me, I was like, so remind me why we're doing this. And he knows exactly why we're doing this, right? And sometimes they'll say, okay, this is why we're doing it, right? And I'm like, yes, sir, let's go. Giddy up.
I love that. I love that.
But it's because he's asked why. Like, what, like, so what? We spend all this time together, so what? Like, what's the end game? And if he hadn't asked that, then it'd be like, okay, Matt, here's your next sales tactic. And here's, boy, have you thought about this part of your business this way? And it's a transaction instead of like, no, we're driving towards something together, not separate, together. And that's a sales leader. You're a sales coach. You're a mentor. You're a not know-it-all mentor. You're I'm in it with you. I get you. And let's go together.
And my favorite way to like understand that, I'm closing my eyes because I'm channeling this. So I think as leaders, if we can get people to put higher octane fuel in their tank, if we can just get them to do that, like yesterday was the 4th of July and I ended up in Park City, Utah with my girlfriend and we had a great time up there. When we came back down to where I live, I'm like, hey, let me fill your tank up with gas because she lives about 20 minutes away. And I was just like, let me fill your tank up. Well, my car is cooler than hers. So I'm going to, okay, I put premium in mine. I put mid-range in hers because my engine needs it. Hers did not, okay?
Yeah.
The fuel you put in, I had an event once at that big company I mentioned to you on the very first thing. I know we're running out of time, where we always would do big events. Like we hired the President of the United States to come give a speech once. And we had Magic Johnson, my favorite basketball player, come and give a speech. And we had to pay him $400,000 for a speech. Jeez. The biggest surprise in that contract with Magic Johnson was he needed us to pay for the jet fuel for his airplane for the trip. And I couldn't believe that the jet fuel was like over $100,000. And
crazy.
It was crazy. So I've thought a lot about fuel ever since then. And so here'll be like a final thing. Cause this went fast, Matt. Thank you. This has been a blast.
Always goes too fast.
It's been fast. Yeah. If you can, as a leader, help people choose to put the high octane fuel and forget about me putting the premium in my car, or forget about that. Like, how do we get to the jet fuel? How do we get to the rocket fuel? How do we do that? Well, find out what people are chasing. This is a mindset thing. This is going to be right up your alley. Like, it's one thing to work hard. I think that we got to choose to chase something. And what are we chasing? Because when you chase, it's way different than when you just work. And if you can get someone to share with you what they chase and why, and if you can let yourself get promoted from being their manager or leader to being part of the chase team, that's a really good way of knowing if they're saying he gets me or she gets me, because that's a very personal thing that requires some vulnerability. And if they're doing easy chases, that means they still don't trust you. You want to get to the place where they're chasing something so big you can't talk about it without smiling. See, I'm smiling already just saying it. You want to talk about something so big you can't talk about it without smiling, man. And that's the rocket fuel that changes everything. Now you're no longer activity managing. Now you're no longer, just talking about accountability. Now it's different. It starts with, what am I chasing? It's a mindset deal. And if you can have people sign up to chase and let you be part of the chase team, there's no limit, because now they will let you help them think about, like, what are they actually capable of? Because again, you're a better mindset coach than me. One of the things I find is people often don't look high enough. And there's a lot of reasons why. But in order to have someone listen to you on you can do bigger, you have to have that trust, that relationship, be part of that team. Otherwise, it's going to come across as you're just a sales manager wanting to get more out of me.
Oh, you heard it here. from Rob Jeppsen, everyone. Put into practice what he talked about. That's where results happen. That's where the holistic results happen, personally, professionally, right? Think back and go re-listen to the story he talked about right at the beginning about that one individual that he met the very first day at that job and the words that that individual used, and start being more intentional, be more consistent with yourself and with your sales team. Rob, we're going to put all links to you and your show notes, things like that. One place you want to point people to, or two, where would you do that?
Listen, man, the first thing I would say is make sure you're subscribing, because hopefully it will get a lot of people to listen. Subscribe to Matt, follow Matt. I'm a fan of Matt. I have one resource that if you're a sales leader, you might like. It's called Sales Leadership United. It is just a collection of sales leadership assets. I think it's the biggest one in the world. It's, 450 leadership topics. It's over 50 sales meetings that you can use ready to go right now. Video clips with Matt. Matt's all through there now. Matt's going to have some of his stuff in there, all searchable. So if you want to work on leadership, maybe it's motivation or trust or whatever, you just do one search and then you'll have podcasts and videos and courses and stuff, all for less than the cost of lunch. So it's something that a lot of people are in. We got 800 people on there and it's growing. And if you like what Matt and I have talked about, you can get more there. And it's salesleadershipunited.com.
That's brilliant. We'll put the link in the show notes. Rob, thank you so much for taking your time. I just appreciate you and all that you do, and you taking an hour of your time with me today. So thank you very much.
Thanks for what you do for our profession. And I'm honored to be part of what you're doing, Matt. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Thank you for joining us today on the Matt Phillips Podcast. If you are like us, we know that you are here to do great things, to become the sales leader that makes things happen and drives big time sales results. We know you have that big vision, and we are here to help get you where you want to go. We're here to help you develop that unstoppable, rock solid leadership skill set and help you train to master the one true differentiator: mental toughness. We would love to be part of your journey. So if you are ready, head over to mattphillipscoaching.com and check out the ways that we can help. As always, please share this episode and make sure you subscribe by clicking the button below. Thank you again. And now, go crush the day.